People chase what pulls away. They are magnetized by what refuses to need them. Detachment is not the absence of feeling. It is the discipline of it. The moment you stop grasping, the world starts reaching. This is the paradox that most never understand, that attraction is born not from pursuit but from stillness. When you withdraw your emotional urgency, you become an enigma, and in a world addicted to validation, enigmas are irresistible. Detachment is not indifference, it's presence without dependence. It's being there, yet untouchable. The detached mind does not reject connection, it redefines it. It understands that attachment to outcomes is the source of all emotional slavery. The more you need something to go your way, the less power you have over it. Control is not gained by grasping tighter, but by letting go until your calmness terrifies those who cannot understand it. Detachment is psychological gravity, invisible, silent, but undeniable. The one who cares least controls the emotional dynamic, not because they are cold, but because they are free. And freedom to the human psyche is the ultimate seduction. When you don't need others, they begin to wonder what makes you so self-contained. They want to taste that kind of power. They want to feel what it's like to be unaffected. That's why people are drawn to the emotionally untouchable, because they embody what everyone secretly wishes they could become. They are not enslaved by reaction, they are architects of it. When you detach, you stop being a participant in emotional chaos and become the observer of it. You rise above the noise, and from that altitude, everything becomes clear. Who truly respects you, who only depended on your availability, and who feared your absence. Most people mistake attachment for love, but it's often a disguised form of control. They cling because they fear emptiness. They chase because silence unnerves them. But those who master detachment have crossed a psychological threshold. They no longer chase comfort, they chase clarity. And clarity demands distance. The ability to step back is not emotional avoidance, it's strategic composure. It's the realization that peace has a higher value than attention. You stop explaining yourself. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop needing to be understood. You simply exist in your own quiet truth, and that truth speaks louder than any performance of affection or confidence ever could. People sense when you are emotionally self-sufficient. It unsettles them because it mirrors their own dependence. Detachment forces others to confront their addictions, to attention, validation, drama, and chaos. They feel your silence as a mirror reflecting their noise. And that's why your absence creates tension. You become the ghost that haunts their certainty. Every moment you don't react, you force them to face themselves. Every unanswered message, every calm look, every slow response, it becomes a psychological mirror they can't escape. They begin to assign meaning to your stillness, as if your lack of urgency hides some secret they cannot decode. In truth, detachment is not about withholding emotion, it's about mastering its release. You decide when and where to reveal your inner world, and that decision gives you sovereignty. When you no longer give people the power to provoke reaction, you rise to a different level of influence, the quiet kind, the invisible kind, the kind that doesn't beg for attention because it commands it effortlessly. Detachment is the art of unlearning the reflex to chase what withdraws. It's the mental discipline of seeing through illusion. You understand that most relationships, romantic, professional, or social, are built on a balance of need. Whoever needs more is unconsciously subordinate. That's why detachment is so magnetic. It reverses the dynamic. When you are not dependent on external energy, people start to orbit yours. They sense a center of gravity within you that doesn't move with the emotional weather. They test you with silence, with distance, with temptation, but your calm remains, and that calm begins to disturb them. Why aren't you chasing? Why aren't you explaining? Why aren't you defending yourself? It's because you've understood the truth. Validation is currency for the powerless. Those who understand detachment no longer trade in it. They operate on a higher economy, that of self-possession. To be detached is to see the world as it is, not as your emotions wish it to be. You stop living through reaction and start perceiving through awareness. You observe your own impulses, the need to respond, to prove, to justify, and you dissolve them with understanding. Every moment of silence becomes an act of psychological refinement. The mind that no longer depends on reaction becomes dangerous because it can no longer be manipulated. Society thrives on attachment to opinions, identities, outcomes, and people. Detachment breaks the cycle. It removes the hooks. It silences the noise that keeps most people trapped in emotional servitude. That's why detachment attracts. It represents freedom. And freedom terrifies those who have never experienced it. They'll call you distant, cold, emotionless, not because you lack depth, but because they can't reach it. Your peace exposes their chaos. Your restraint exposes their impulsiveness. Your silence exposes their dependence on noise. To be detached is to reclaim authority over your inner state. You no longer let the outside world dictate your emotions. You no longer respond to every provocation. You no longer let fear of loss shape your behavior. This is not arrogance. It's equilibrium. It's the calm that comes from seeing through the illusion of control. People don't realize that attachment is often fear in disguise. Fear of being forgotten, fear of being alone, fear of being unseen. Detachment is what happens when you face those fears and survive them. Once you've learned that solitude doesn't kill you, you become powerful. Once you've learned that rejection doesn't define you, you become untouchable. Once you've learned that peace is found in presence, not approval, you stop chasing ghosts. Detachment doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you stop begging. You love from strength, not from scarcity. You connect without losing yourself. You give without needing to be repaid. You can walk away without resentment, because your worth is not tied to being chosen. The detached are not emotionless. They are emotionally sovereign. They feel deeply but express selectively. They understand that emotion is sacred currency, wasted on those who haven't earned it. And when they withdraw, the world notices. Suddenly everyone feels the absence of their energy, because it was never loud, but it was real. Detachment sharpens perception. It lets you see the difference between connection and attachment, between desire and dependency, between love and control. It teaches you to recognize manipulation dressed as affection, pity disguised as loyalty, attention masquerading as care. When you detach, the fog clears. You stop confusing intensity for depth. You stop romanticizing inconsistency. You stop mistaking attention for affection. You begin to understand that what's calm, consistent, and silent has more power than anything that shouts. Detachment is the beginning of real attraction, because it's the end of desperation. You become a presence that others can feel but can't consume. They want your energy but can't own it. They want your attention but can't command it. They want your approval but can't predict it. That unpredictability is intoxicating. It keeps people curious, invested, and slightly off balance. And that's where your influence grows. The more they seek to decode you, the deeper they fall into your gravity. The detached don't chase, they attract, they don't beg. They inspire pursuit. They don't explain. They let silence speak. Because in that silence lies power. The kind that forces others to question their assumptions and confront their dependence. The psychology of detachment is not about apathy. It's about mastery. The ability to hold emotion without letting it control you, to engage without losing your center, to care without collapsing into need. Detachment gives you control over the only thing you truly own, your inner state. And when you control that, you control everything. Because the world cannot enslave a mind that no longer reacts. Every moment of restraint strengthens your presence. Every unspoken response builds your mystery. Every calm withdrawal expands your power. And soon those who once took you for granted begin to feel the weight of your absence. They replay the moments they ignored. They question the calm they once dismissed. And deep down they start to understand. It was never your words that made you powerful. It was your silence. It was your ability to not need, to not cling, to not beg for attention that made you unforgettable. Detachment is not the end of connection, it's the purification of it. Only from detachment can real closeness be born, because only those who don't need control can truly connect. When you detach, you no longer enter relationships to fill a void. You enter them to share your completeness. And that is why you attract. You are whole, while others are fragments searching for completion. And nothing draws fragments like wholeness. That's why they stare, why they chase, why they remember. You represent what they lost, inner peace. You represent what they crave, self-possession. And even if they never say it, they feel it. You become the mirror of what they could be if they stopped needing so much. That's the true power of detachment. It doesn't just attract others, it transforms them through your example. In your silence, they hear their own chaos. In your distance, they recognize their dependence. And in your calm, they find what they've been searching for, even if they never have the courage to name it. Detachment is not a mask, it's mastery. And those who master it never chase validation again. What makes someone unforgettable? It's not beauty, talent, or even kindness. It's their distance. It's their ability to exist in a space you can feel but not fully enter. The unreachable hold a kind of power that the accessible never will. It's not about arrogance or superiority. It's about energy management. The one who is too available becomes invisible. Familiarity dulls fascination. But the one who gives only glimpses, who offers presence in doses, becomes an obsession. People are drawn to what they cannot possess, and detachment weaponizes that truth. The more you stand apart from the emotional crowd, the more gravitational your energy becomes. Detachment transforms you into a psychological mystery, one that others spend mental energy trying to solve, and energy spent thinking of you is power. That's why the emotionally restrained are often remembered long after the expressive are forgotten. Because silence lingers where words fade. The human mind is built to seek closure, to resolve uncertainty, to finish emotional equations. When you withhold that closure, when you exist just beyond reach, you create a loop in their thoughts. You become a question that has no answer. They replay interactions, reanalyze your expressions, reinterpret your tone. They start to imagine. And imagination is more powerful than reality. When someone imagines you, they're no longer dealing with who you are. They're dealing with a projection shaped by their desires and insecurities. Detachment triggers this projection. It allows others to fill the gaps with fantasy, with longing, with meaning you never had to create. That is why the less you reveal, the more they feel. Because emotion feeds on uncertainty, mystery turns calmness into charisma. The detached don't chase emotional highs, they create them in others through restraint. Every unanswered question becomes emotional fuel. Every subtle response becomes a trigger for deeper curiosity. When you detach, you shift the dynamic from explanation to interpretation. You stop talking and start being interpreted. And in the game of power, that shift is monumental. Those who can make others interpret their silence are the ones who control the emotional tempo. They decide when tension rises and when it breaks. They decide who feels safe and who feels uncertain. Because uncertainty is emotional gravity. It keeps people orbiting around you, wondering, doubting, imagining. You don't have to act superior, you simply remain silent long enough for their mind to elevate you. The detached don't perform, they exist. They don't explain. They allow perception to do the work, and perception, once set in motion, is hard to undo. When someone perceives you as self-contained, as untouchable, as emotionally immune, they start assigning qualities to you that you may never have claimed. Strength, depth, wisdom, control. But these qualities are not illusions. They're projections born from your silence. This is the hidden psychology of detachment. It lets others define your power while you remain motionless. And nothing is more attractive than what cannot be fully decoded. The more people try to understand you, the deeper they fall under your influence. You are no longer a person to them. You are a concept, an energy, a riddle. The mind cannot rest in uncertainty, and so they keep returning to you in thought, even when they try to move on. That's why detachment creates emotional gravity. It's not the loudness of your presence that draws people back. It's the silence that leaves them unsatisfied. They feel that something about you remains unfinished, unrevealed, and the human psyche is addicted to completion. Detachment denies it, creating endless curiosity. In relationships, it's the one who holds emotional composure who dictates the rhythm, not through manipulation, but through stillness. The detached understand that emotional energy is a currency, and every reaction is a payment. So they spend carefully. They don't waste emotion on the unearned. They don't reveal their feelings in moments of pressure. They let silence build tension until the other person reveals themselves first, and that's how they gain the upper hand. Not by force, but by patience. The detached can wait because they are not desperate for validation. They can walk away because their worth isn't tied to being wanted. This ability to walk away, to withdraw energy without collapse, is what makes them magnetic, because everyone feels their withdrawal. Detachment amplifies presence by mastering absence. The more calmly you remove your energy, the more people realize what it meant. You don't have to prove value. Absence proves it for you. Those who depend on your emotional availability will crumble when it's gone. Those who respected you will draw closer in silence. Detachment reveals truth, who is bound by need and who is drawn by respect. It strips the illusions of connection, leaving only what is real. But this power has a cost. To master detachment, you must first endure solitude. You must face the discomfort of being unseen, the ache of being misunderstood, the silence of being alone. You must learn to stand in that void without reaching for distraction. Most never pass that test. They run back to noise because silence confronts them with their dependency. But once you pass it, once you realize that solitude doesn't kill you, you gain emotional immortality. You no longer fear being left. You no longer crumble when people withdraw, because you've learned to be whole in your own absence. Detachment gives you control because it removes fear. And fear is the root of all weakness. The fear of being forgotten makes people perform. The fear of losing control makes them cling. The fear of rejection makes them talk too much, give too much, chase too much. But the detached person no longer fears loss because they have mastered it internally. They've already faced the absence. They've already buried the need. They've already died to dependency. That is why they radiate peace, even when everything falls apart. Their calm is not an act. It's a consequence of inner stability. And this stability becomes attractive because it represents emotional safety in a chaotic world. People crave what they cannot destroy. They crave stability. They crave composure. They crave someone who doesn't lose themselves in reaction. Detachment is not coldness. It's emotional immunity. It's the ability to feel everything but choose what to express. The detached still love, but they love from freedom, not from fear. They can walk away without hatred because they never tried to possess. They can forgive without losing respect because they never worshipped. They can remain kind without being naive because they see clearly. The emotionally detached are not cruel, they are clear. They see the invisible strings that control most people, the need to be liked, the hunger for validation, the fear of silence, and they cut them one by one. That clarity changes their presence. You can feel it when they enter a room. Their energy is grounded, steady, and unbothered. They speak slowly. They respond only when necessary. They carry no rush because they operate from abundance, not need, and abundance attracts. It always has. People mistake energy for attraction, but it's actually control. The one who controls their energy controls the room. The detached have nothing to prove, and that nothingness becomes everything. The absence of desperation becomes a magnet for attention. Others sense that they are not performing for approval, and that self-containment becomes rare currency. Everyone wants to be seen. The detached have learned to see themselves. That is why they are pursued, because others want to borrow their stability, their peace, their self-certainty. But that peace was not free. It was forged in loss, in rejection, in detachment itself. Every time they chose silence over reaction, they built inner armor. Every time they chose patience over impulsiveness, they gained emotional depth. Every time they chose distance over chaos, they strengthened their center. Now nothing external can shake them. People sense that, and it both comforts and intimidates them, because true detachment reveals what most people are not ready to face. That love without attachment feels safer, and freedom without approval feels better. The detached do not chase peace. They are peace. They are the calm at the center of the storm, and that calm attracts like gravity. It's the kind of attraction that doesn't burn out because it doesn't rely on performance. It's the quiet fascination that grows in silence. The emotionally detached are like still water. You see your own reflection when you look into them, and if you are unstable, that reflection can feel unbearable. That's why some people flee from the detached. They cannot stand what they see in themselves when faced with someone who doesn't need their approval. Detachment is a mirror, and not everyone can handle the truth it shows. It exposes emotional dependence. It unmasks manipulation. It reveals the power imbalance hidden behind affection. The detached see it all. They see who needs to dominate, who fears being alone, who confuses drama with love. And they don't play the game. They let silence reveal the truth. Because silence always does. Those who master detachment become invisible controllers, not through deceit, but through understanding. They influence the energy of every interaction because they are not consumed by it. They can love without losing balance, and they can walk away without bitterness. That is not indifference, that is power. The kind of power that doesn't shout, doesn't demand, doesn't beg. It just is. And that kind of being, calm, self-contained, untouchable, is what every soul secretly seeks. The detached are not unreachable by accident. They are unreachable by choice. And that choice is their throne. The world teaches you to express, to explain, to prove that you feel. It convinces you that transparency equals honesty, that openness equals depth, that to be understood is to be loved. But this conditioning is a trap, a subtle form of psychological exposure that weakens your aura. The more you reveal, the more predictable you become, and predictability is death to power. Emotional control, on the other hand, is the art of governing perception. It's the quiet discipline of deciding what others get to see, what they get to feel, and when they get to feel it. To master detachment is to master that art. It's to realize that you are not obligated to share every reaction, not required to respond to every emotional demand. You are a sovereign mind, not a public domain. When you stop feeding others with emotional availability, they start starving for your energy. They feel the absence of what used to nourish their ego, and that's when you gain control. Control is not about dominance, it's about awareness. It's the understanding that energy flows towards stability. When you remain calm while others lose composure, the balance of power shifts. Their emotions feed yours. Their anxiety amplifies your calm. Their confusion magnifies your clarity. Emotional control turns chaos into fuel, and this is what separates those who command respect from those who constantly chase it. The detached don't suppress emotion. They refine it. They experience everything but express selectively. They know that emotion is influence, and influence must be rationed like oxygen. You don't give it freely. You administer it with precision. You decide when to respond, how much to reveal, and when to remain still. Because silence, when timed correctly, becomes a weapon sharper than words. It confuses, it intrigues, it destabilizes. The more someone expects a reaction from you and doesn't get it, the more they begin to spiral. They start questioning their own power, and that's how you regain yours. The mind always seeks emotional balance. When it feels denied, it compensates by chasing. The one who reacts less becomes the one pursued more. Emotional control reverses the chase. This is why detachment is so misunderstood. People think it's about not caring when it's actually about caring intelligently. You still feel, but you do not broadcast. You still connect, but you don't collapse into it. You still desire, but you do not depend. Emotional control is invisible power, and that's what makes it terrifying. You can't manipulate someone who doesn't react. You can't guilt-trip someone who doesn't seek validation. You can't seduce someone who is at peace within themselves. Detachment makes you psychologically untouchable. And that untouchability doesn't repel people, it draws them in. Because what we cannot disturb, we secretly respect. What we cannot control, we begin to worship. When you no longer allow the outside world to dictate your internal state, you become an emotional anomaly, and anomalies attract curiosity. People wonder what you know that they don't, what strength you possess that they lack. They sense something unspoken in you, a calm that feels earned, not inherited, and they're right. Because true emotional control is not natural, it's forged. It's born from disappointment, from exhaustion, from seeing too much and learning too well. You start realizing that most of what people call connection is just emotional noise, reactions, projections, dependencies disguised as affection. When you detach, you stop participating in that noise. You stop rewarding volatility with attention. You stop responding to manipulation with energy. You become still. And in that stillness, others start to reveal themselves. Emotional control makes you a mirror. When people can't provoke you, their own instability surfaces. They start to show you their truth. That's the hidden advantage of detachment. It reveals the real. You don't need confrontation, you need observation. Watch how people behave when they can't get an emotional rise out of you. That's who they truly are. The detached understand this, and that's why they rarely react, not out of apathy, but out of strategy. They let others expose themselves first. This control transforms relationships. When you don't rush to defend, justify, or prove, you create an emotional vacuum. And in that vacuum, truth emerges. People start revealing their motives, their insecurities, their hidden desires. They fill the silence with confession because they can't stand not knowing what you think. They project, they explain, they overcompensate. And all you did was remain calm. Emotional control gives you power because it puts time on your side. While others act impulsively, you wait, you observe, you allow tension to work in your favor. Because in every emotional interaction, tension is leverage. The one who can hold tension without breaking always wins. The world belongs to those who can stay silent, while others lose composure. This is not manipulation, it's mastery. It's the discipline of choosing peace over reaction, clarity over confusion, power over impulse. Emotional control makes your energy precise. You no longer waste it trying to fix misunderstandings or change perceptions. You understand that perception cannot be forced. It must be shaped through presence. Your calm becomes your reputation. People start describing you as composed, mysterious, intimidating, or magnetic. They don't realize that what they're feeling is the weight of your control. You're not louder than them. You're deeper. You're not more emotional, you're more aware. You've stopped performing. You've stopped explaining. You've stopped feeding their emotional hunger. And because of that, they start feeding on your silence. The detached understand that attention is a form of energy exchange. Whoever reacts first loses equilibrium. Whoever stays composed sets the emotional frame. You set the frame by remaining unmoved, not by ignoring, but by observing. Observation is power because it keeps you informed while keeping others exposed. You become the eye in the storm, the center that remains untouched as everything else spins around you. People confuse control with suppression, but suppression is weakness in disguise. Control is awareness without attachment. It's the ability to feel something fully and still decide your next move. You can feel anger and remain calm. You can feel sadness and still maintain presence. You can feel attraction and still withhold action. That is power. Because in every situation, the most composed person dominates the energy field. They decide how long the interaction lasts, how deep it goes, and when it ends. Emotional control allows you to shape reality subtly, invisibly. It gives you command without confrontation. That's why the detached are both feared and desired. People don't know whether to trust them or chase them, but either way they can't ignore them. And that inability to ignore is influence. Emotional control turns you into a presence that demands attention without requesting it. Your silence becomes communication. Your stillness becomes signal. Your absence becomes a message, because those who master emotion speak through energy, not words. The detached know that once you can control your emotions, you can control perception. And once you control perception, you can control reality. This is why they never rush to explain misunderstandings. They let others fill the gaps with whatever narrative their mind creates. The truth doesn't need defending. It needs distance. Time always reveals what emotion tries to conceal. The emotionally detached understand that power flows to those who wait. Every overreaction, every emotional outburst, every desperate plea for clarity. These are leaks of power. Detachment seals them. It conserves your inner authority. The more you practice emotional restraint, the more centered you become. You begin to sense energy shifts, to feel emotional patterns before they unfold. You stop needing closure because you can read intention. You stop fearing rejection because you see beyond it. You stop clinging to outcomes because you trust your equilibrium. Emotional control is the final evolution of detachment. It is the realization that nothing external can truly harm you unless it breaks your peace. And peace, once mastered, becomes armor. People will try to disturb it. They will test it. They will attempt to provoke reactions, not because they hate you, but because they crave your energy. Don't give it freely. Let silence answer. Let stillness respond. Let presence do what words cannot. Because in the end, the one who can feel everything yet show nothing is the one who holds all the cards. And when you reach that level of mastery, attraction stops being something you seek. It becomes something you radiate. There is a strange paradox that rules all human connection. The moment you pull away, you are felt more deeply than when you were present. Detachment intensifies presence through absence. When you disappear, you become amplified in the imagination of others. They replay your words, your tone, your stillness. They begin to realize how much energy they once took for granted. You see, people rarely appreciate consistency, they crave contrast. When you are always there, you blend into the background of their comfort. But when you retreat, you create a void. And that void speaks louder than your presence ever could. It's not cruelty, it's psychology. The human mind is wired to assign value based on loss. What is available feels ordinary. What withdraws feels precious. Detachment understands this, and it uses the law of absence to re-establish equilibrium. By withdrawing energy, you reset perception. You stop overfeeding others with your time, attention, and emotional presence. You allow scarcity to restore value. This is why those who detach are never forgotten. Their silence becomes a haunting echo in the minds of those who once felt entitled to their presence. Every time you walk away with composure, you force others to confront the truth. You were never dependent on them. They were dependent on you. Absence is a mirror that reflects dependence back to the dependent. It's uncomfortable, but it's cleansing. When you step back, people are forced to reevaluate the meaning of your presence. They begin to realize that your calm wasn't disinterest. It was power. Your silence wasn't avoidance, it was control. Your distance wasn't rejection, it was clarity. They begin to miss what they never truly understood. Your restraint, your composure, your emotional balance. Absence has a way of magnifying everything they once overlooked. It turns memory into magnetism. Every unanswered message, every missed conversation, every moment of stillness becomes amplified in emotional weight. And the irony is that you didn't have to do anything but stop doing. Detachment teaches that power grows not from action, but from withdrawal. The more you detach, the more people chase what they can't reach. But the chase isn't about you anymore. It's about what they lost within themselves when you stepped away. They want back the version of themselves that felt whole in your presence. They don't realize that what they're chasing is not the person, but the emotional equilibrium they felt around that person. Detachment exposes this illusion. It shows how much of human attraction is projection, the desire to be stabilized by someone who refuses to be destabilized. The detached become symbols of self-mastery in the eyes of others. Their absence doesn't make them vanish. It turns them into archetypes of composure. People start idealizing them, mythologizing them, assigning spiritual or emotional depth to their calm. They are seen as mysterious, wise, or emotionally evolved, not because they said more, but because they said less. Silence leaves room for imagination, and imagination creates meaning. The detached understand that imagination is more powerful than communication. When you stop explaining, people start interpreting. And interpretation is endless. Each person projects their own longing, guilt, or admiration onto your silence. In this way, absence becomes alchemy. It transforms restraint into fascination. The one who can disappear without resentment becomes unforgettable. But to wield absence properly, you must detach without malice. The moment your withdrawal becomes revenge, you lose control. True detachment is not punishment, it's purification. You withdraw not to hurt but to heal, to cleanse the emotional imbalance that constant presence created. You step back to remind both yourself and others that connection without respect is dependence, and dependence without balance is slavery. Absence reclaims balance, it reintroduces self-worth into the equation. And the result is attraction reborn from awareness. When you come back, so if you choose to, the energy has shifted. You are no longer seen as an option, but as a force. People tread more carefully. They measure their words. They respect your time. They feel your boundaries without you having to speak them. That is the quiet reward of detachment. Respect without demand. Because when others feel the cost of your absence, they stop taking your presence for granted. Detachment trains the world how to treat you. It teaches that silence is not emptiness. It is consequence. But make no mistake, to reach this level of control, you must be comfortable being misunderstood. You must let others mislabel your silence as arrogance, your distance as indifference, your peace as pride. You must allow them to create their own narratives while you remain unmoved, because the detached understand a deeper truth, that those who need constant explanation are not ready for peace, only for reassurance. And reassurance is a chain. The truly powerful do not explain their energy, they embody it. They let distance speak for them. They understand that presence shouted loses impact, but presence withheld becomes sacred. When you can walk away without announcing it, without bitterness, without seeking reaction, you have entered the highest form of power, the kind that whispers, not demands. The world teaches you to stay visible, to stay loud, to constantly prove relevance. But relevance built on presence is fragile. Real influence survives absence. That's why the most powerful figures, in history and art, in relationships, understood the rhythm of withdrawal. They appeared rarely but meaningfully. They understood that scarcity sharpens desire. The detached follow the same rhythm, not as manipulation, but as preservation. They protect their energy the way others protect possessions. Because once you understand how much your peace is worth, you stop offering it to those who cannot afford it. Detachment is emotional wealth, and the wealthy do not give everything away. The irony is that this restraint doesn't isolate you, it elevates you. The more you detach, the more the right kind of people are drawn to you. They sense depth, stability, mystery, qualities that only exist in those who don't need to perform for attention. Detachment filters. It attracts those who resonate with peace and repels those addicted to chaos. Your circle shrinks, but its quality expands. The noise fades, but the signal grows stronger. You begin to see who values presence, not access, who respects silence, not noise, who feels your absence without resenting it. Absence exposes truth in others, the same way silence exposes truth in yourself. You start to see how few people are comfortable with calm. Most are addicted to emotional turbulence. They confuse it with connection. When they meet someone detached, they project emptiness onto them because they cannot comprehend peace that isn't performative. They call it coldness, but it's discipline. They call it mystery, but it's awareness. They call it arrogance, but it's boundaries. The detached live in a different emotional frequency, one that doesn't depend on external validation to stay steady. Their value does not fluctuate with attention, and that is why they attract without effort, because effort is the signature of those still seeking approval. Detachment is the quiet confidence that you are enough as you are, with or without being seen. And that truth radiates in silence. You no longer chase recognition because your peace is recognition enough. You no longer demand understanding because misunderstanding no longer threatens you. You no longer perform emotion to feel connected because connection to yourself is now sufficient. Absence becomes your stage, silence your language, peace your identity, and from that state, everything you attract comes from alignment, not from need. You stop chasing and start choosing. You stop asking and start allowing. You stop reacting and start observing. And in that shift, everything begins to orbit differently. People who once ignored you start noticing. Situations that once drained you lose power. Energy that once scattered begins to consolidate around you. You become the center of gravity, not because you demand it, but because your stillness commands it. This is the paradox of detachment. When you let go, everything finds you. Not because you pursued it, but because your peace made you magnetic. Detachment doesn't isolate, it illuminates. It makes your presence rare, your words valuable, your energy unforgettable. And those who once underestimated you begin to realize it was never your attention that was special, it was your restraint. There comes a moment when you no longer flinch at distance, when you no longer interpret silence as rejection, when you no longer confuse being unseen with being unworthy. That moment marks your transformation from dependent to untouchable. True detachment is not about walls, it's about freedom. It's the understanding that your peace is not up for negotiation. You no longer chase because what is meant for you cannot be lost through silence, and what is not meant for you cannot be kept through noise. You realize that life itself is a constant act of letting go, of control, of outcomes, of illusions of permanence. Every attachment that once made you anxious now makes you wiser. You see how everything that left you was meant to cleanse you. Every rejection was redirection toward sovereignty. Every silence from others was a lesson in self-conversation. And now, you no longer fear solitude, because solitude has become your sanctuary. The world no longer dictates your rhythm. You move to your own internal pulse, slow, deliberate, unshakable. That calm cannot be faked, and that's why it attracts. People feel it before they understand it. It's the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you no longer need to control perception. You simply embody presence. You no longer rush to prove worth, because worth proven is worth dependent. Real worth needs no witness. When you reach detachment, you realize that the goal was never to win people over. It was to win yourself back. The self that doesn't chase attention, doesn't beg to be chosen, doesn't crumble under absence. The self that stands in silence, knowing that power is not in how much you speak, but in how little you need to. Detachment doesn't mean disconnection, it means connection without fear. You can love now without anxiety, because you no longer confuse love with possession. You can give now without depletion, because you no longer give to earn. You can walk away now without anger, because you no longer equate distance with loss. You've detached from illusion, the illusion that people, outcomes, or recognition complete you. What completes you is clarity. The detached understand that life's power dynamic operates through energy, not effort. Those who chase give energy. Those who wait receive it. Those who speak impulsively lose energy. Those who stay silent accumulate it. The moment you stop trying to be understood, you start to be felt. And feeling transcends understanding. People won't always be able to explain why they're drawn to you, only that your calm feels safe, your silence feels powerful, your distance feels magnetic. You've become what they cannot find in themselves. That's why detachment attracts. It represents inner balance in a world addicted to chaos. The detached are not running away from life. They are moving deeper into it, seeing beyond emotional turbulence into the underlying patterns of control and illusion. They understand that every attachment, every obsession, every emotional storm was a mirror reflecting their own dependence. Once you see that clearly, attachment loses its grip. You stop needing validation because you validate your own stillness. You stop chasing clarity because you find it in quiet reflection. You stop fearing loss because nothing essential can be taken from a grounded soul. You begin to operate on a frequency that others mistake for mystery. They see your distance and call it arrogance, but it's actually protection. They see your silence and call it emptiness, but it's actually focus. They see your calm and call it indifference, but it's actually depth. You no longer explain, because explanations dilute the energy of truth. Truth doesn't beg to be believed, it simply exists. And so do you, grounded, unbothered, free. This state of detachment changes everything. Your relationships, your goals, your presence. You start to attract situations aligned with peace rather than chaos. You stop being drawn to drama because your nervous system no longer recognizes it as home. You stop craving attention because your spirit has outgrown hunger. You stop seeking closure because your awareness no longer needs completion to feel whole. You become immune to emotional manipulation because you've transcended the game. People cannot control someone who doesn't fear loss. They cannot guilt-trip someone who doesn't need approval. They cannot diminish someone who already lives in quiet contentment. That is the essence of untouchability, not arrogance but alignment. You are no longer playing by emotional economics. You are operating on energetic truth, And that truth is simple. What flows will stay, what forces will fade. The detached trust that rhythm. They don't chase, they align. They don't demand, they allow. They don't beg, they embody. And because of that, everything they attract feels effortless. The world bends towards stillness, not noise. That's why the calm eventually lead. Because while the restless are reacting, the detached are observing. And from observation comes foresight. From foresight comes strategy. From strategy comes dominance. The detached live in that sequence, unhurried, unseen, but always ahead. They don't fight for control, they create it through composure. Every delay becomes an opportunity, every silence a statement, every withdrawal a recalibration of power. This is what most fail to understand, that detachment is not weakness, it's weaponization of awareness. It's realizing that emotional distance gives you perspective, and perspective gives you command. You see the patterns others miss because they're blinded by need. You stay calm when others panic because you've already detached from outcomes. And that calm makes you the reference point, the emotional anchor that everyone unconsciously seeks. But not everyone deserves access to it. The detached are selective not out of pride, but out of precision. They know that energy shared carelessly dilutes essence, so they protect it. They choose silence not to hide, but to preserve. They choose distance not to punish, but to maintain balance. They choose solitude not to escape, but to recharge. In doing so, they become rare, and rarity in any form is revered. The more you detach, the more you realize that true abundance is not having more, it's needing less. You no longer depend on emotional noise to feel alive. Your satisfaction comes from alignment, not attention. And in that self-sufficiency lies an elegance that others can't imitate, only feel. It's the energy of someone who has nothing to prove, someone who can be loved or hated, praised or ignored, and remain exactly the same. That steadiness is hypnotic because it's extinct in a world ruled by overexposure and insecurity. The detached have mastered the rarest skill, or to exist fully without needing to be seen. That's why they are remembered long after the loud are forgotten. Their power is not in display, but in depth. Their silence is not emptiness, but presence concentrated. They are not unreachable, they are at peace. And peace in its purest form is irresistible. When you reach this state, life changes shape. You no longer fear endings, because you understand that detachment is the beginning of everything real. Every time you let go, you make space for what aligns. Every silence becomes strength, every absence becomes gravity. You realize that control was never about holding on, it was about knowing when to release. Detachment gives you that knowing. It turns pain into precision, confusion into clarity, chaos into calm. You no longer live through reaction, but through rhythm. You move through life like water and fluid, quiet, unstoppable. You've learned that the highest expression of power is serenity, and serenity is born from detachment. The final truth is this: you do not attract by proving, you attract by being. You do not control by forcing, you control by allowing. You do not rise by resistance, you rise by release. Detachment is not withdrawal from life, it is mastery of it. It is standing still in a world that never stops moving, and in that stillness, becoming the only thing that cannot be moved. Silence isn't the absence of power. It's the proof of it. Subscribe is because real power doesn't shout, it whispers.